Hello, this is the presentation for Group 17 for the final course project for Data Analytics and Security. The team members were Stephen Campbell, Teresa Medellin, and Rifat Sheikh.
Hi, this is Rifat Sheikh, and I'll start off with the definition of wrongdoing. During the initial phase of our project, before we dove into Enron's wrongdoing, at first we investigated Enron's annual report in calendar year 2000. A few things stood out there. Enron's revenue grew 150% from the year 1999 to the year 2000. This is extremely difficult to achieve for any large cap company. Also, their total assets almost doubled in 2000 compared to total assets in 1999. Somehow this cost of total assets acquisition did not affect their net profit and cash from operating activities negatively. In fact, their net profit and cash flow increased in 2000. Enron also reported equity from special purpose entities, also known as SPE, of around $5 billion. Also, Enron conveniently owned a net voting interest of 50% or below 50% for those SPEs, so that Enron did not have to report the debt of those SPEs in their balance sheet. After examining the publicly available information, we concluded that Enron might be guilty of misrepresenting their financial statement and misleading their investors. This violation falls under both accounting fraud and securities fraud under SEC regulations. Our task was to find incriminating evidence from the Enron email database that pointed to accounting fraud or securities fraud.
Hello, I'm Stephen Campbell, and I will be covering the strategy that our group used. The strategy that we took consisted of 4 phases, with the first step being a WideNet key phrase query search that we did across the entire email corpus. The second step was a term frequency inverse document frequency analysis of all of the terms within all of the email subset. The third step was a k-means clustering of those terms. And finally, step 4 was utilizing a social networking graphing approach to better determine the players that were involved in the email exchanges. In the first step of the strategy, we used a WideNet key phrase query search across the entire Enron email corpus. We knew that we wanted to start with a smaller subset of emails that we could then refine further from there. After initial research, we landed on a key phrase Raptor that is a reference to a special purpose entity vehicle that Enron utilized during that time in order to limit their financial risks. As you can see from this screenshot, which is an excerpt of our Python query, we utilize the Elasticsearch query, the multi-match, to search for Raptor across both subject and text fields. We limited the size initially to 1,000, and that was returned within a pandas data frame that we were then able to loop through to see details. Since the initial search returned 385 emails, we didn't actually review all of the emails at this point and determined that we needed further refinement from there. The second step of the strategy was to utilize the term frequency inverse document frequency analysis, or TF-IDF, on the email subset from step 1. TF-IDF provides a statistical method of determining the relevancy of words in a set of documents based on the number of times that word appears in a document and the inverse frequency of that word across documents. The screenshot shows the Python code we used for this step. We initially used the sklearn TF-ID vectorizer method with the base stopwords dictionary that comes with the library. A stopword dictionary provides a list of common words such as the, or, and from that would be artificially inflating our returned values if we were to utilize the search without any type of stopword. After our initial run, there were additional words and numbers that we wanted to exclude, so we also added a preprocessor shown there in 1 in order to remove any numeric words from the emails, and we also added additional words to the custom stopwords dictionary. The third step of our strategy involved taking the terms and weights generated from the TF-IDF analysis and clustering the top words using k-means clustering. K-means provides a method to find the top terms and group them together based on their association to one another within the emails based on distance. The intent was to allow a better method for us to determine which words or group of words to further use to narrow down the scope of our emails. At the bottom here, you can see the output of the TF-IDF analysis with the k-means clustering. These provided several good keywords that we could then use to narrow down their search further. The fourth step of the strategy was to utilize a social networking approach to visually see the top players or influencers within Enron specific to this subset of emails. This approach would allow us to narrow our search down to those individuals that had a larger amount of email communication with others and had a larger group with which they interacted. We took the pandas data frame from step one and looped through all of those emails, creating a list of sender nodes and recipient nodes. And then we created each edge weight based on the number of times those individuals emailed each other. The output of this was a CSV file that we could then load into a social networking graphing tool. To visualize these nodes and edge weights, we chose to use Gephi, which is an open source tool for visualizing network graphs. After loading the CSV file and running the Atlas algorithm that tool provides, we were able to better group all of the nodes and visually see the different players within the social networking graph. The larger nodes shown here are those players that interacted with more individuals and had a larger number of communications. After reviewing the top players, we were able to see that Kaminsky was an individual that stood out to us since he's both a top player in the social network and he also appeared in the TF-IDF with k-means analysis as a keyword. From what we learned in steps 1 through 4, we were able to further narrow our Elasticsearch query down to a combination of two key phrases, Raptor from the original search, plus valuations, which came from our cluster of keywords, along with using sender Kaminsky, which came from our social networking analysis. Altogether, this provided an output of 11 emails, which was a far fewer number of emails to then research and review directly. We were then able to take that set of 11 emails and review whether or not there were wrongdoings found within the emails.
In this section, we'll highlight the set of emails we found using our strategy and evaluate how good they are at indicating wrongdoing. This is the first suspect email that indicates wrongdoing. Here we see that the sender stated different scenarios of Raptor's valuation based on Enron's stock price. Shortfall and Peregrine were both Enron Raptors referred in this email. These Raptors would buy underperforming assets, and if these assets continue to decline, then these Raptors would pay Enron. It is apparent in this email that these Raptors paid Enron through Enron stock, as the sender of the email is trying to model the valuation of these Raptors' restrictions of exercising their options based on Enron's stock strike price. This email seems to indicate that these Raptors paid Enron via Enron stock. Next up, we have an important email from Vince Kaminsky. This whole email from Vince Kaminsky is proof that Enron's deals were way too complicated for a general investor to understand. Vince claimed here that these transactions are too complex and controversial, and he needed to see legal documents and contracts before supporting the valuation of LJM Raptor transactions. Vince Kaminsky was unhappy that the team did not do their due diligence, and valuation was conducted based on verbal information. This clearly shows that Enron was not thorough and transparent with their Raptor deals. This particular email is short, but carries a lot of value. Excerpt 3 is linked to Excerpt 2 as Vince Kaminsky sent the same email sent in Excerpt 2 to his private AOL email account for his record keeping, as we can see here. This suggests that Vince Kaminsky wanted to keep proof for himself, showing that he was not on board with the questionable valuation of LGM Raptor-related transactions. He might have thought that what his team was doing was not legal, and he did not want to be associated with Enron's unethical accounting and business practices. This act of sending a copy of his work email to his private email demonstrates that he did not trust his employer Enron, as Enron might delete his email from the email server. This specific email is a fascinating one as well. Here we see Vince Kaminsky refused to sign off on LGM Raptors transactions deal based on what he had mentioned in Excerpt 2. Since the email was sent on the 4th of October in 2001 by Vince Kaminsky, this particular email we see here in Excerpt 4 was sent on the 22nd of October in 2001. So in between The team got a couple of weeks to address Vince Kaminsky's concern. However, we see that his team did not provide any legal document related to LJM transactions. He claimed here that the information provided by the team still lacked enough due diligence for him to sign off. This is a great example of Enron's lack of interest in being thorough with their accounting practices and basing valuations based on verbal and often conflicting information, according to Vince Kaminsky. Excerpt 5 is actually very similar to Excerpt 3. Here again, we see Vince Kaminsky send himself a copy of his email from Excerpt 4 to his private AOL email account for record keeping. He reinforced here that he lacked trust in Enron by doing this twice regarding the LGM Raptors valuation. This email comes from a time after SEC opened investigation on Enron's accounting on the 22nd of October 2001. Here we can see Vince Kaminsky was speaking with the litigation team that was handling the LJM case investigation within Enron. He tried to find Excerpt 2 and Excerpt 4 in his Enron email account, but somehow he failed to find them. Enron could be motivated to delete these emails from Vince Kaminsky's mailbox since those emails contained evidence of Enron's wrongful valuation of LJM Raptor transactions based on verbal and conflicting information. It is an illegal act if Enron intentionally deleted this email as Enron was under investigation. Nevertheless, Vince Kaminsky was able to retrieve those emails since he had a copy of them in his personal AOL email account.
Hi, this is Teresa Medellin, and I will be covering the proposed improvements to search strategy and the unfixable problems sections of this presentation. As we get into the proposed improvements section, we have to ask ourselves, what would we have done better in order to obtain the final set of emails that would confirm our suspicions and back up our defined wrongdoing, the definition of wrongdoing that we identify for Enron. As we went through that exercise, we thought back to when we went through our code and when we worked with Elasticsearch. And as we were trying to figure out how to reduce or subset our emails, we used the TF-IDF algorithm. But through that exercise, we realized that what would really help us would have been if we could have figured out how to add a higher weight to proper nouns such as business names and the names of individuals. This would have been really helpful because the TF-IDF algorithm kept giving us words such as thanks or regards or sender or words that are Houston relevant such as 713 or HOU. These words weren't going to be helpful and they were just creating noise and giving us a cluster of words that we would ultimately use to filter down our emails. We saw this problem. We conducted a lot of research to try to fix it. Sadly, we didn't come across the exact solution that we needed. And as we got closer to the date of our project being due, we decided to go with an alternative approach. And that was to add additional keywords as stop words to our dictionary. As we mentioned in the approach earlier, we used the stop words dictionary to take out common words that wouldn't help our final search. So to that exercise, to that part of our code, we added stop words such as again 713, Enron, because we don't Enron is going to be mentioned in many emails, so we didn't need that to be in our cluster. Words numbers such as 713, 281, things that were relevant to Houston, but again, not relevant to the final emails we needed. So we use that in order to to compensate for the fact that we weren't able to find a solution for a TF-IDF algorithm to place proper weight on the business names and the names of individuals. Another thing that we think would have been helpful in this exercise is using additional words as part of our white search. So we did use several words and we used things like Raptor, we used LJM in order to do our whitenet search. But at the end of the day, the exercise required us to come down to one set of emails. But I think what we would have done in a different scenario would have been to look at sets of emails with different sets of searches. Maybe do one with LJM, another one with Raptor, another one with FastOut, just to see more targeted emails come out from our original process of using the widenet search, the TF-IDF algorithm, the social networking approach. Another section that I'm going to cover is the additional improvement section. As I mentioned in the previous slides, while going through our exercises, we determined that testing a wider variety of keywords for the initial whitenet search would have been helpful to us. When we first started going through our exercises and filtering down to our emails, we were hoping that the exercise would require us to pull different sets of code to pull different sets of emails, because when we first started using the social networking approach, we would receive 2 to 3 emails back for each of the senders after using our filtered words that we'd receive from TF-IDF algorithm and from the clustering. So one of our additional improvements to this exercise would have definitely been to be able to do that exercise and actually pull emails from different sets of algorithms from different sets of exercises. We think this would have been helpful because the Enron email corpus is so vast and their wrongdoing could have been supported by so many different instances. And as mentioned in the Smartest Guys in the Room book, they didn't have an exact turning point where they just did something illegal. It was a snowball, an avalanche of things that happened throughout the years that led to the convictions and the legal ramifications. Thank you. Next, I will cover the unfixable problems that we identified as we went through the exercises for this project. As our team met up and went through our project and had our brainstorming sessions and planned our moves ahead, we identified several unfixable problems that we realized we couldn't solve, but that would have been so valuable in this process and in identifying the final set of emails that would have proved our definition of wrongdoing or supported our definition of wrongdoing. 3 things that really bubbled to the top were the fact that we didn't have related evidence to the Arthur Andersen work. There was a lack of audit and any Arthur Andersen related evidence. Another thing is that there was an absence of the attachments in the emails. Several of the emails we looked at reference attachments, and they were great. We were very interested in seeing more information, but the email corpus doesn't contain those attachments. So we were only left to speculate as to what the attachment could have been, what kind of evidence could it have provided. The other thing that really stood out to us was the fact that there were no financial records in the emails. And if there were any, they were small snippets that didn't quite support or give a full view of what was actually happening at Enron at the time. So to go into each of these more deeply, the lack of audit and Arthur Andersen related evidence, that was something that we would have been very interested in obtaining because Arthur Andersen was complicit in not reporting unethical accounting practices. At the time, if you read the Smartest Guys in the Room book, Arthur Andersen was so focused in maintaining the Enron relationship that they got to a point to where they were so intertwined that their main goal was to keep that relationship great, keep making money, keep basically do anything that was necessary in order to keep them happy. They were to the point to where consultants would be rolled off if they weren't easy to work with, and by easy they didn't go exactly with what Enron wanted. So as part of the investigation, we found out that Andersen admitted to deleting emails and getting rid of evidence. So this is a big little problem as part of this exercise because we don't know what was deleted and we don't know what kind of evidence could have been provided by this deleted data. Another thing that we want to cover is the absence of attachments in the emails. We saw several emails and even in some of our returns that email attachments are referenced in them, but they are not available in the Enron email corpus. This limited our investigation because we weren't able to fully dive deep into the references that were made to emails. They could have included incriminating evidence. It could have just been Excel spreadsheets, but that data is just not available, and that makes it an unfixable problem. The final and third thing that really bubbled to the top for us was the financial records. Enron throughout the emails, you see that they had a lack of proper bookkeeping. Their public financial statements were constantly referenced and shared with the public, but there were not many references within the emails that stated that these are the actual concrete records that they have. In fact, some of the emails that we pointed out about Kaminsky, he's asking for more concrete data, not verbal data, things that really actually state what is happening with the Enron and not just the numbers that ultimately match what the stock market wants to see. So we believe that having the financial records and comparing that to what was portrayed would have been key in order to finding incriminating evidence. Thank you.